Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to bring you guys my end of May wrap up. I have 21 books to talk about in today's video, and I read a total of 38 books in the month of May, which is the most amount of books that I've ever read in any month. I have been seeing in the past few months that I've been steadily increasing the amount of books I read per month. So as usual, if you want to hear me discuss the books that I read in the first half of May, I will have that video linked up in the cards above. And without further ado, let's just get into it. So the first few books that I read in this part of May were the last 3 books in Elizabeth Hoyt's Maiden Lane series. I did an entire reading vlog dedicated to my experience reading that entire series, which is 12 books. So I will also link that reading vlog up in the cards above if you want to hear my thoughts about that whole series. So next up is Anna K Away by Jenny Lee. This is the second and final book in the Anna K duet. And the first book is essentially an Anna Karenina retelling. This is set in modern day New York City, and we are following a half Korean main character, Anna K. But there is also just a very diverse set of characters that we're following overall. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars, just like with the first book. I had the same issue of I felt like it was a bit slow paced at times, but I really enjoyed the audiobooks for both of these, and I definitely recommend this little duet if you love teen soap operas in book form, such as Gossip Girl and American Royals. Next up, I'll quickly bring up that I read 2 books in the Ice Planet Barbarians series by Ruby Dixon. The first one I'm going to mention is Barbarians Prize. This is the 6th book in the series, and one thing I want to mention about this installment is that it follows Tiffany, who is Black. I think she is the first main character that we've followed in this series so far that isn't white, but I might be wrong about that. I enjoyed this one just as much as all of the other books that I've read in the series. I will say the first half of this one in particular was really fun because Tiffany and Saluk, who is the alien she's having a romance with, they are friends, and there are quite a few aliens that are trying to win Tiffany's favor, but she's very overwhelmed by that. And she realizes that she really likes Saluk as a friend and possibly more. They start practicing kissing together and falling in love that way, so I thought that was really adorable. And then I also read the next book after that in the series, which is Barbarians Mate. This was pitched to me as a Grump Sunshine trope because Josie, our main character, throughout this whole series has been very sunshiny, and then her mate, I can't remember his name, but he is very grumpy. He actually had a mate when he was younger, but that mate like rejected him and then ended up dying of a disease that went through their whole tribe, basically. So yeah, he's very grumpy because of all of that. But this wasn't the Grump sunshininess that I was hoping for, actually, because Josie ended up being quite grumpy throughout this book for various reasons. So it just wasn't quite as entertaining as I thought it was going to be, but I still give it 4 stars. These are all really fun books, but yeah, definitely after reading this installment, I've decided to take a break from this series because I definitely don't want to burn out on it. Next up, we have The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. This is book 1 in a series. I can't remember what the name of the series is called. It might just be the Bridge Kingdom series, but it's a fantasy romance adult series. Following 2 main characters, we have Laura, who is the princess of one kingdom, and we have Aaron, who is now the king of another kingdom. And some years before this book starts, there was an alliance formed between these 2 kingdoms, and to solidify that, Laura would marry King Aaron. So it is an arranged marriage, and it's actually set up so that Laura, once she is married and moves in with King Aaron, she will infiltrate the kingdom and bring it to its knees. So I went into this expecting a lot because I know Riley really enjoys this series. I know Jess really loved this first book. I gave it like 2.5 stars. There are several reasons why this book just did not work for me. This is a slow burn romance, which I usually love slow burns, especially when they are done right. With this one, I just feel like Danielle L. Jensen waited so long to introduce any kind of romantic inklings between Aaron and Laura that then it just kind of came out of nowhere. And there was a point in this book where Aaron is the first one to confess his love to Laura, and then a little bit later she confesses it back, and I was just like, where did this even come from? Like how did you people fall in love? I just didn't believe it. So that was annoying. And then towards the end, I just found that I didn't really care about these characters, and I didn't care about the war that was happening because there's other kingdoms involved, there's other things going on, right? It is a fantasy series. So yeah, unfortunately this just didn't quite work for me, and I definitely am not planning on reading the sequel because yeah, I just don't care. Ever After Always by Chloe Leese is book 3 in her Bergman Brothers series. I have loved the other 2 books that I've read in this series as well, gave them all 5 stars, but this one in my opinion is just on another level. It is a marriage and trouble story. We all know that's my favorite trope ever, but this one is about Freya, who is the eldest of the Bergman siblings. First of all, I just love the Bergman family so much. They are just everything and endlessly entertaining. But then we have Aiden, who is her husband. They've been married for probably about 10 years, so they've been together for a long time. Basically, they've just been miscommunicating with each other over the past few years, and their marriage reaches a breaking point by the beginning of this novel, and so they decide to start marriage counseling. The whole Bergman family decides to go to Hawaii, and so of course Aiden and Freya go with them, and things go on from there. So I thought that this book was pretty darn near perfect. The only thing that I thought was missing from this book was the therapy sessions themselves, because we really only got to see 2 of those, and the second scene was pretty short. So I wish we could have seen more of that, but other than that, I think this book was just absolutely amazing. I loved Freya and Aiden separately, but seeing the 2 of them grow together as a couple and change over the course of this book. I also love that Freya is a plus size character. We love that representation. Aiden is very swoon worthy. I loved seeing him fall in love with romance novels. He starts reading some Lisa Kleypas novels because the other Bergman brothers suggest that to him. By the way, if you love the Bromance Book Club series in general, you will love this book in particular, because the Bergman brothers kind of induct Aiden into their own special group, and some of the things that they talk about are romance novels. So yeah, that was really fun as well. I just think this is an absolutely fantastic series, and I cannot wait for the next book to come out. Next book I want to talk about is my one nonfiction read for the month, and that was Know My Name by Chanel Miller. If you don't know who Chanel Miller is, she is the sexual assault survivor in the Brock Turner case. And I was so looking forward to getting to this book because I had heard, I want to say Cindy from Read with Cindy rave about this book. I think this was one of her favorite books that she read last year. And just the way that she talked about Chanel and her writing and her story sounded absolutely incredible. And it really, really was. I just think the perfect word to describe this book is powerful. My goodness, this book has so much power to it. I think no matter who you are, you'll learn a lot about not only what it's like to live as a woman in today's society, but also about sexual assault in general and rape culture and all of those very complex issues that are going on in our society. Cannot recommend it highly, highly enough. I also really recommend the audiobook. It's just really great to hear these words from Chanel herself. Next book I want to discuss is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is the first book in the Poppy War trilogy, and my God, is this book a journey. So this book is about, like, I want to say maybe like 450 pages, and like so much happens in this book. It's absolutely insane to see where we start on page 1 versus where we end up at the end of just this first book. So what's really cool about this world and this story is that it is set in an ancient Chinese-like world, but it is fantastical, of course. And it is based off of the Second Sino-Japanese War, which occurred from around 1937 to 1945. That conflict was essentially what was happening during World War II with Japan and China, and I'm sure there were some other countries involved, but those are the main 2 countries involved in that conflict. And I thought that that setting and basing it off of an actual war from our own history was so well done. I learned so much about that history that I had never learned about before, because when we're taught about the Second World War, we don't really talk about that side of the war. We only talk about the US side, right? I also loved following Rin, our main character. She's such a complex and interesting and morally gray main character. It's kind of cool to see her make decisions that maybe aren't the best, but you totally understand her reasoning behind the things that she does. And I'm just so intrigued. I cannot wait to read the second book. It's on my June TBR. I highly recommend this book too if you're somebody who is trying to get more into adult fantasy, because yes, there were some times where I was a bit confused as to like what was going on, because war politics confuse me. But as long as I like read the passage a couple of times, I had no problem understanding the story. Oh, and I gave this 5 stars, by the way, as well as Ever After Always and Know My Name. Next up, I have to talk about what is probably one of my most favorite romance novels ever. At this point, I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that, and that is The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata. Everybody was right. This book is just as amazing as everybody says it is. Shame on me for waiting this long to read this book, and shame on me for this only being my second Mariana Zapata book. Like, clearly I need to read more from her. Like, what? I put in my Goodreads review that Mariana Zapata is straight up ruining me for other romance authors, because that's how fantastic she is, and that's how incredible this book in particular was. I have read From Lukov with Love, absolutely adored that book, but this one in particular I think is on a different level. Just to tell you a little bit of what this is about, it is a football romance, as you can tell. We're following our main characters, Vanessa and Aiden. Vanessa has been working for Aiden, who is a football player, as like his assistant and his cook for the past couple of years, and so she decides to quit that job because she wants to devote all of her time to her graphic design business. And so Aiden just shows up to her apartment one day and is like, I need you to marry me so that I can stay in the United States, because he's from Canada and he doesn't want to have to apply for another work visa. He wants to be a permanent resident. And so yes, this is a marriage of convenience. Very, 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 very slow burn. This is like 625 pages. And just like with From Lukov with Love, I didn't feel like I read 625 pages. Yes, it's very slow burn, but it's still paced so well that like I honestly wanted more by the end, because the way that she paces her slow burns, like it's not until the last, like, I don't know, 35 pages that Aiden and Vanessa like actually get together. And so because of that, you want more, you know? Yeah, it's not necessarily that I thought something was missing from this book by any means, but just because of the nature of the slow burn, like I could have read at least 100 more pages of this story, because I just loved Vanessa and Aiden so much. I love them individually, I love them together, their journey is just stunning. I even put in my Goodreads review that like their romance is like the blueprint for how contemporary romances should be written. And like the way this book made me feel, like I teared up so many times, and the way that I squealed when they actually kissed for the first time, like, yeah, it's just, wow. If you are an idiot like me that has waited this long to read this book, like, this is your sign that you need to read this. You absolutely, absolutely need to read this book. Next book I want to talk about is just so adorable and has a special place in my heart now. This is The Comeback by E.L. Shen. This is a middle grade novel about our main character Maxine, who is an up-and-coming figure skater. She is 12 years old during the course of this novel. And it's basically about her life as a figure skater and also navigating middle school and friendships and bullies. I do want to point out that there is racism and bullying involved in this book, but the way that that is all handled is really, really well done. I loved the conversation that Maxine had with her parents towards the end, in particular about their Chinese heritage and about racism in general. Like, that made me tear up. I just thought that was absolutely, absolutely spectacular. This book just has so much heart to it, and I adore figure skating, and you can tell that E.L. Shen loves figure skating as well, and it was just fun to see that through the pages, I guess you could say. Yes, this is absolutely fantastic. Had to give it 5 stars. Wholeheartedly recommend if you're looking for more middle grade novels or more books about figure skating in general. It's just so, so good. Next up, I have With Visions of Red book 2. So I read book 1 of this series maybe a month or so ago as part of my reading vlog that I did, where I read some of Bree's absolute favorite romances. That vlog will be linked up in the cards above. So this is a 6 novella series. This is a very dark romance series that also is centering around a murder mystery plot. We have this very sadistic serial killer on the loose, and our main character, Sadie, I believe her name is a behavioral analyst, and she's trying to figure out who this murderer is. And then the hero, Colton, is a man that she meets while at a BDSM club, and he is really into shibari, which is the art of rope tying, essentially. And so the two of them start this really explosive romance in book 1, and in book 2 things are developing with that as well as with the murder mystery. And I gave this one 4 stars as well. I think this is a very intriguing series, and I liked that this installment had a bit more of the romance, but I could still use even more of it because I really love Colton and how much he just adores and obsesses over Sadie. Like, I just love their relationship so much, but these first 2 books have been focusing a lot on the murder mystery, so I just want more of the romance. So we'll see what happens as I continue on with the series, which I definitely will, because like I said, it's very intriguing and very well written. So next up we have Sacrifice to the Beast by Jessa Kane. I have been wanting to read more from Jessa Kane ever since I read Breaking the Bully by her, I want to say in late April, and I am absolutely obsessed with that novella, but I knew that this one was going to be quite a bit different. This one is definitely satirical, ridiculous, wild, crazy. I know that some of Jessa Kane's novellas are crazy just like this one, so I knew what I was getting myself into with this. So the plot of this one, we have a heroine. I do not remember the characters' names anymore, but she gets offered up as a sacrifice to this beast that has been killing livestock in their town. They live in a rural farm town. And so it's a ridiculous romance between her, a human, and this beast. And yeah, things are just as wild and as crazy as everybody says that it is. This also gave me vibes of another novella that I read that Jessa Kane co-wrote with Alexa Riley called Back River Quiver. But I will say I enjoyed this one definitely more than Back River Quiver, because while this one is very ridiculous, it's also just funny. I like the sense of humor that Jessa Kane put into especially our main character, the heroine. I definitely chuckled out loud several times because I just had a good time with this one. Whereas with Back River Quiver, it was like so ridiculous that I was just like over it. I don't know. So yeah, if you're looking for a paranormal romance novella that is just bonkers, like, you would enjoy this. Next up we have Lines and Lace by Megan McKinney. I was so excited going into this book because this is a historical romance that was highly recommended by Joanna Shoup, who is one of my personal favorite historical romance authors. This is also a book that takes place in the Gilded Age in New York City, which is the same setting that Joanna Shoup writes in. We have our main characters, Alana and Trevor. They go into a forced marriage. I wouldn't call it a marriage of convenience. Trevor essentially forces Alana to marry him because of reasons. I'm not going to get into all of that. And things go on from there. I actually didn't give this a rating. By the way, I gave Sacrifice to the Beast 3 stars. Yeah, I keep forgetting to tell you guys the ratings. Anyways, yeah, I didn't give this one a rating because I do not know how to feel about it, because I loved the writing. I loved most of the characters, the setting. Like, I just think it's a beautifully done romance, except for the hero, Trevor. Trevor is trash. He is one of the worst heroes that I've ever read about. Oh my goodness. He is so mean and downright cruel at times to Alana, our heroine, for like 98% of this book. I can understand his reasoning for not liking Alana at first, but time and time again, she tries to prove him wrong and tries to get into his good graces, and she finds herself falling in love with him even though she knows that she shouldn't. But time and time again, he just pushes her away, and he is just kind of the worst. And then the very last like 2% of this book, he has this very sudden change of heart, and all of a sudden he loves her back and they live happily ever after. So that was just so unbelievable to me. I don't recommend this one. Like I said, I think it's really well written, but I just cannot get behind the hero, so I can't get behind the romance. So next up, I read a few paranormal romances because I was kind of loosely participating in the Love in the Night readathon, which is a paranormal romance readathon that was happening from like, I want to say May 24th through today, which is May 31st. So I read like 5 paranormal romances, I think, for that. So the first one I read was Lover Revealed, which is book 4 in the Black Dagger Brotherhood series. If you don't know what the series is about, it is a vampire romance series that centers around this elite group of vampires known as the Black Dagger Brotherhood, and they are tasked with protecting the vampire race from these beings known as lessers, which are essentially humans that were made immortal through some crazy rituals, basically. And so they are the villains of this series. This one centered on Butch, who's actually a human who has become really close with the Brotherhood. And then we have Marissa, the heroine, who is a vampire that Butch has been in love with for a really long time. This one was just fine. I gave it 4 stars, but I'm leaning more towards 3.5 stars. One, I do think these books are a bit too long. I understand why they're so long because it's not just centered on the romances. There's other things going on. We also get the POVs of the villains. We get POVs of characters that will be main characters in later novels. So I get it, but I just think this could have been edited more, and I didn't love Marissa and Butch because I never loved their characters in the first 3 books, so I just wasn't blown away by the romance. However, there is one thing I really appreciated about this novel is that there is a scene where Butch and Marissa have sex for the first time, and Marissa is a virgin. And I thought that the depiction of her losing her virginity was very realistic, and I just really appreciated seeing that in a romance novel. I don't know, I feel like in most romance novels that involve a virgin heroine, they kind of skim over the reality of losing your virginity. I like that there was a scene afterwards where Marissa went and talked to Beth, who was the heroine from the first book, and that they just had like a very real discussion about virginity and sex and all of those things. So I think that was very well done, but other than that, like, this book was just fine for me. So yeah, I think I'm leaning towards 3.5 stars. Then we have Deal with the Demon by Chase Verity. Oh my god. So this was the optional group book for the readathon. It's a paranormal romance novella. So this one is about our main character, Heidi. She's a struggling single mother with 2 teenage children, and she one day just finds this business card with a QR code and downloads this app, and it's this business where you can get a demon for 28 days to do your bidding, to do whatever you want it to do, to find your success in life. And so this demon just shows up in her house, and they name him Dristan. And this is one of the sweetest paranormal romances ever, because from the get-go, from the moment they meet, he is just so willing to help her with anything that she needs. And so he like starts cooking for them and being like a housekeeper so that she can go out and interview for jobs. And when she does get a job, it's one where she has to work like the night shift. And so he's there to like help her kids with their homework, and Dristan just falls head over heels for Heidi like so fast. And so it's just really cute to see over the course of this little novella, Heidi falling back in love with him, and it was just adorable, gave me all the feels. It's just really great. Highly, highly recommend if you're looking for a paranormal romance novella. Next up, we have This Side of the Grave by Janine Frost. This is book 5 in her Night Huntress series. So this one I gave 3.5 stars. Mainly because the plot was just okay for me. It didn't feel like the stakes were all that high. No pun intended, because this is a vampire romance series. But yeah, and to me the villain felt lame. So like, it was just fine. I will say, as usual, I really enjoyed Cat and Bones, our main characters in this series. If you don't know what the series is about at all, we have Cat, who at the beginning of the series is a half vampire, half human, which is very, 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 very rare in this world. And then we have Bones, who is a vampire who reminds me a lot of Spike from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So this is just kind of a fun paranormal romance series. This one is definitely one of my least favorite installments of this series so far. But yeah, it is what it is. I'm looking forward to reading the last 2 books in this series as soon as possible. Next up, we have one of the best paranormal romances that I have ever read to date, and that is Wolf Gone Wild by Juliet Cross. This is a book that has been on my TBR for so long, and the reason that I finally read it is that the audiobook for this one finally came out, and so I scooped it up right away, and I'm so glad that I went the audiobook route because the narrators, Aiden Snow in particular, who voices Mateo, the hero, like, his voice was just absolute perfection. Like, I cannot recommend the audiobook enough. But to tell you a little about the series, first of all, it takes place in New Orleans, which I didn't know about. Like, why did nobody tell me that? I'm from New Orleans. Like, I should know these things, right? But this is about our main characters. Evie is a witch, and then Mateo is a werewolf. But he has a hex put on him that prevents him from shifting into his werewolf form, which isn't good because the werewolf inside him, kind of like an alter ego that calls itself Alpha. This alter ego is essentially going crazy because Mateo can't shift into that form. One of the things that I loved about this book actually was the Mateo Alpha situation, because Alpha is essentially kind of a voice inside Mateo's head, and basically Alpha just wants Mateo to either beat somebody up or have sex with somebody, and as soon as Mateo meets Evie, like, Alpha is so obsessed with her, and it's just endlessly entertaining. Yeah, this book was absolutely fantastic. I loved the world. Again, I love that this takes place in New Orleans. We have so many different kinds of paranormal creatures going on, not just witches and werewolves, but vampires and these creatures known as Grimms, and there's other things going on. I cannot wait to read more of the books in this series, but I'm definitely going to wait until the audiobooks come out. And I just love Mateo with my whole heart. He is absolutely everything. So yeah, highly recommend this one. Next up is another paranormal romance that I just absolutely adored. This is Midnight with the Devil by Emma Castle. So this is a devil romance, specifically a deal with the devil romance. We have our main characters, Lucian, who is the devil, but he lives on Earth most of the time and is a nightclub owner. And then we have Diana, who is a human. So Diana's father is dying from very serious lung cancer, I believe. And Lucian just becomes obsessed with her and goes to her and offers her a deal that he will save her father, will completely get rid of his cancer in exchange for her soul. And specifically, she has to make herself available to him for the next 3 months to do whatever he wants with her. So things go on from there. This is very steamy. So well done. I loved the creative liberties that Emma Castle took with the devil in general and how hell works, and there's also dealings with some angels involved as well, like specifically Diana's guardian angel. And this book was pretty short as well. I think it's only like about 230 pages, so you'll definitely breeze right through it. I loved the ending in particular. I thought that it was just really perfect, really well done. I mean, this is definitely the ultimate bad boy, good girl trope for sure, given that he's the devil. And I also think this is a good pick to go with if you're just now getting into darker romances, because while this does have darker themes to it, it's nothing that's too dark in my opinion. So yes, highly recommend this one. Gave this 5 stars. I feel like I keep forgetting to give my ratings for these books, but unless otherwise stated, I gave the book 5 stars. Just know that. Then we have The King's Spinster Bride by Ruby Dixon. This is a fantasy romance novella. You'll recall Ruby Dixon because I talked about her earlier in the video with her Ice Planet Barbarians series, but this is a novella that I've been wanting to read for a while because Jen from the Book Refuge read it recently and has raved about it, so I knew that I needed to give it a chance. So this is interesting because it is an age gap romance with an older heroine, younger hero. Both characters are virgins as well. So we have Hala, who is the princess of one kingdom, and we have Mathior, who eventually becomes the king of an opposing kingdom. So in the prologue, we see that they knew each other when Hala was about 16 and Mathior was about 8. And Mathior was essentially a prisoner of war in Hala's kingdom. And so then in present day, I want to say 16 years later, Hala's kind of in hiding in like a convent, and so Mathior, who is now the king, like I said, he comes to find her and marry her because he's just been in love with her for the past 16 years and he has been just waiting to be with her. And yeah, things go on from there. It's a very sweet and lovely fantasy romance novella. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was just really nice. I don't really have much more to say about that. Last but certainly not least, I'm going to talk about the book that I'm currently reading, which is Filthy by Serena Akeroyd. I'm about like 64% of the way through this book, so I think it's totally fine if I talk about it now, even though I haven't finished it yet. But this is a mafia romance. It is book 1 in a series by Serena Akeroyd. This book's quite long though. I think it's like a little over 450 pages, which is quite long for a contemporary romance. I know that that was a complaint among a lot of people that I follow, is that this book was too long. I agree that it's long. I don't think that it's too long though, because I think it's setting up the rest of the series and I think it's doing a really good job of that. But to tell you what's going on, it is a mafia romance series, but this book is about Aoife and Finn, and there's an age gap going on. Finn is around like 37 and I think Aoife's maybe in her early to mid 20s, I think. And so this starts with Finn coercing Aoife into having a one-night stand with him, essentially, and things go on from there. Lots of mafia drama for sure, definitely a darker romance, very steamy. I think I'm gonna go with 4 stars. I don't think my rating is gonna change by the time I get to the end. It's just a really solid start to the series. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this very lengthy end of May reading wrap up. I hope that you guys enjoyed. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to tell me about some of the books that you've been loving this month. And yeah, with that being said, I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you in advance if you do. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!